AITA for staying silent after my daughter disinvited me, and then begged me to come back. I spent years sacrificing every penny, every breath, so that my daughter's life would run smoothly. And then she looked me in the eye and told me I was not welcome at her Christmas table. That night, I opened a folder full of receipts, made a single phone call, and by New Year's, her world began to crumble. They say a man in his 60s should slow down. I tried. Most mornings, I keep it simple. I step out onto my porch in a faded blue robe, steam rising in the cold, and wait for the same red cardinal to tap on the railing at 7 a.m. I stretch my stiff hands, watch the buses rumble down Oak Street, and whisper to myself, "You did your part, Walter. Breathe." My name is Walter Harlan. I ran a small carpentry shop for 3 decades. Kitchens, decks, porches, the kind of work where your name is your reputation. I guarded both like they were gold. My wife, Margaret, used to joke that I would line up the clouds themselves if I could find a ladder tall enough. It has been 6 winters since she passed. And yes, I still talk to her picture when the house feels too quiet. Routine keeps an old engine running. Waking before dawn, sweeping the porch, wiping down the mailbox, just out of habit. Then making oatmeal the way Margaret did. A pinch of brown sugar, a splash of milk, 3 dried cherries on top. Twice a week, I still take small jobs. Adjusting a hinge, building a shelf. People pay me in cash, sometimes in pies. I accept both. On my fridge, a crooked magnet holds a crayon drawing from years ago. A little girl in a construction helmet next to a stick figure with a tool belt. Me plus daddy equals best builders. That was Tessa, my daughter. Her first steps were on sawdust. The first time she scolded me, she said, "No more nails in your pockets, Daddy." She was 10 when her mother's illness started, and she helped me more than I ever deserved, stirring soup, placing her small hand on my shoulder when I would fall asleep in waiting rooms. There were 3 of us once, then 2. After Margaret's funeral, I told Tessa the same thing I told every banker when times got tight. We will figure it out. And we did. When Tessa married Ethan, we figured it out again. They found a neat little house on the west side. Good bones, bad roof, a kitchen frozen in the 90s. Ethan had a spreadsheet, a plan, but what he really needed was me, my credit, my history with a loan officer who still remembered me paying off a truck a month early, 19 years running. I co-signed with my lucky pen. The number felt heavy on my tongue. $2,150. Every month. On the 12th. For them. For a while, that is what I told myself. I do not brag about what I spent. Some men keep ledgers in their heads. I kept mine in a folder I never opened. The down payment, the new roof after the hailstorm, the kind of oven Tessa swore she needed for her Christmas baking business that lasted 3 weeks. Even the suit for Ethan's seminar, when his boss hinted he should look sharper. Every time they promised to catch me up when they got on their feet, I wanted to believe them. I wanted to believe her. On Sundays, I would bring them groceries, change their air filters, tighten squeaky hinges. Sometimes Tessa's "thank you" sounded more like a question she was afraid to ask out loud. But I still held on to the Tessa from before, the little girl who cried if I scraped a knuckle, convinced a person could run out of red. But subtle signs started to appear. Ethan's parents, Preston and Vivian Dalton, would visit and survey the house like appraisers. We prefer lighter floors. An open concept is more modern, you know. You can always finance it. Vivian would laugh too loudly at my stories, then pivot to galas and art museums. Tessa's voice would soften around them, echoing their words. Mom says marble is an investment. And still I swallowed it. I raked their yard, repaired their screen door, took pictures of the first snow, and sent them to Tessa with little notes. First flakes. Your mom would have made chili. Her reply came hours later. A snowman emoji and a heart. I told myself not to overthink it. I made 2 bowls of chili anyway. One for me, one for habit. December brings Margaret back more vividly than any photograph. Pine, cinnamon, boxes of fragile ornaments labeled in her handwriting. That first week, I brewed coffee, dropped a bag off at Tessa's, tightened another cabinet hinge, and left a note. Coffee's on sale at McCann's. Got you a bag. Love, Dad. That night, I watched It's a Wonderful Life. I laughed where I always laugh, cried where I always cry. When the credits rolled, I turned off the television and listened to the furnace sigh. I told myself, peace is earned. One fixed hinge, one paid bill, one silent act at a time. But that peace was about to end. The first real crack appeared on a Thursday afternoon, just a week before Christmas. I went over to Tessa's with a tin of cookies, Margaret's old recipe, cardamom, and molasses. I still had snow on my coat as I wiped my boots on the mat. The air smelled of pine and expensive candles. Tessa was curled on the couch, swiping a finger across her phone. Ethan lounged across from her in one of those showroom armchairs. I sat carefully in the seat opposite them, the leather groaning under my weight. I smiled, trying to keep the mood light. I was thinking, I said, I could make my clam chowder for Christmas this year. Haven't broken out that recipe in a while. Your mother always said it was the one thing I made better than her. I waited for Tessa to smile. She did not. She tucked her hair behind her ear, her ring glinting in the light of their 12-foot tree. Her voice came out too measured. Dad, we need to talk about Christmas. Something in my chest went cold. I set the cookie tin on the table next to one of those glossy magazines she liked now. Okay, I said softly. Talk. She would not meet my eyes. You are not going to be joining us this year. The words hit like a nail gun to the ribs. My throat went dry. What? It is complicated, she rushed to say. Ethan's parents are flying in from Seattle. They have their own traditions. They prefer a certain atmosphere, a vibe. Vibe? My voice echoed in the quiet. Ethan leaned forward, his tone that of a polished salesman. Walter, they are very particular. Wine pairings, classical music, conversations about travel. You know how it is. We do not want any awkwardness. Awkwardness. I looked around their home. The floors I had sanded, the crown molding I had installed, the windows I had sealed, it all bore my fingerprints. You mean I do not fit their vibe? Tessa winced. Her eyes glistened, but her jaw stayed firm. Dad, please do not make this harder. It is just better this way. We can do something the following weekend. The following weekend. As if Christmas could be rescheduled, just another appointment. The silence grew heavy. I could hear a ringing in my ears. I thought of Margaret's chili simmering on snowy nights, of a 10-year-old Tessa begging me to lift her up to place the star on the tree. My voice came out cracked and low. So my carpentry, my money, my life. It is good enough to build your world, but not good enough to sit at your table. Ethan crossed his arms. Walter, do not take it personally. This is about class. My parents expect a certain standard. The rest of his words blurred together, but I caught enough. Education. The Hamptons. Lineage. My blood burned, but I did not move. Tessa sat still, not stopping him, not defending me. Midway through his speech, I understood. This was not just rejection, it was humiliation. The kind whispered in corners, the kind that lingers. But that was not the worst part. In the kitchen, I saw her newsstand mixer gleaming on the counter. Stainless steel. $200. Tessa had told me it was an investment for her baking business. That business lasted 3 weeks. I remembered the charge on my card. My eyes scanned the refrigerator I replaced in the spring, the screen door I installed last month, the bank officer pitying me when I refinanced my own home so they could buy theirs. All those sacrifices, and now I was disposable. I swallowed hard. And where am I supposed to spend Christmas? Tessa's lip trembled. Maybe with Aunt Judith? Or like I said, we can do something after. I laughed, but there was no joy in it. It was hollow, the sound of something breaking. After, I repeated. I took my coat from the snow-dusted rack. My hand gripped the doorknob, the metal cold against my palm. I turned one last time and looked at my daughter, her husband, their perfect house. Tessa, I said, my voice firm. She blinked. What? Tell your in-laws something for me. What is that? I pulled the door open. The December night swept in, sharp and merciless. Merry Christmas. And I walked out into the snow, my heart heavy, my anger burning low and steady. That is when I decided I would not be quiet anymore. The drive home that night felt longer than the miles on the road. Snow hit the windshield, tiny sparks vanishing into the dark. I did not turn on the radio. I did not need it. My head was loud enough. I pulled into my driveway on the east side of Columbus, the same house Margaret and I bought when Tessa was in middle school. The porch light flickered, like always. I had been meaning to fix it for months, but every spare dollar had gone elsewhere. To Tessa, to Ethan, to their perfect house. Inside, the silence was sharp. I set the unopened tin of cookies on the counter. The furnace hummed, but the quiet still seeped through the walls. I did not take off my coat, just sat at the table with Margaret's picture facing me. Her smile frozen in time, her head tilted like she was mid-laugh. I whispered, "Did you hear what our daughter said to me tonight?" There was no answer, just the creak of old wood. But the words needed to be said. I did not sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the plaster ceiling, tracing the same cracks I had counted hundreds of times. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tessa's face when she told me I was not welcome. The way she dropped her gaze, unable to meet mine. The way Ethan talked about atmosphere and class. At 2 a.m., I gave up. I made coffee. I sat in my recliner and let the shadows stretch long across the living room. My mind kept rolling through the years. Every sacrifice I made, the down payment I pulled from my retirement fund, the storm windows I bought instead of fixing the truck's transmission, the countless automatic transfers that kept them comfortable while I wore the same pair of boots for 3 winters. One memory hurt more than all the rest. It was the summer Tessa turned 12. Margaret's illness was starting to show, though it did not have a name yet. Tessa wanted to go to an art camp. 3 weeks, $200, money we did not have. I skipped groceries that week, worked a double shift, and came home with an envelope. "You are going," I told her. Her face lit up brighter than fireworks. She hugged me so tight I thought my ribs might crack. That moment sustained me for years. It was my reminder that the sacrifice meant something. And now she could not find a chair for me at her table. By dawn, I had not slept a minute. My hands shook as I made coffee, the machine vibrating as if it shared my rage. I took my mug to the porch. The neighborhood was waking up, cars warming in driveways, kids pulling on coats. A young father was loading presents into his car while his kids pressed their noses against the fogged-up glass, smiling with the thrill of Christmas. That was us once. Me loading up the truck, Tessa bouncing on her toes, Margaret laughing as she wrapped scarves around our necks. The memory pricked like a thorn. I pressed my palm against the hot mug until it burned. The days that followed blurred together. I clung to routine. Oatmeal, sweeping the porch, small jobs when the neighbors called. But everything felt heavier. My smiles to passing neighbors felt forced. At night, I would lie awake listening to the boiler, wondering how long you can let your self-respect be chipped away before it is gone for good. My phone rang often. Tessa's number. Ethan's. Even Vivian's name popped up once. I never answered. What could they possibly say? That it was a misunderstanding? That excluding me was just a tradition? One afternoon, I finally opened the drawer I had been avoiding. Inside was the manila folder. Thick, heavy, frayed at the edges. I brought it to the table and spread it out like evidence at a trial. Receipts, bank statements, transfer slips. 5 years of silent sacrifice. The numbers blurred, then came into sharp focus. $2,150 every month. A $40,000 down payment. Repairs, upgrades, even Ethan's seminar suit. All told, it was over $160,000. My retirement. Margaret's nest egg. Every dream we had saved for ourselves. I leaned back, staring at the pile. A bitter laugh escaped me. They wanted class. Their marble countertops and polished floors were paid for with my labor, my credit, my silence. That night, well past midnight, something inside me shifted. It was not rage, not anymore. It was something colder, clearer. I realized I had been financing my own humiliation, paying the bill for my own exclusion. And for the first time in years, I asked myself, what if I stopped? I looked at Margaret's picture. Her eyes seemed to meet mine. Maybe it is time, I whispered. Maybe it is time they learned what a family really costs. The boiler kicked on with a low, deep rumble, like an answer. And right there in my kitchen, with the folder spread out before me, the thought grew sharp and steady. I started thinking very carefully. The morning after I went through those papers, I woke with a calm I had not felt in years. Not peace. No, peace is soft. This was different. This was purpose. I brewed the good coffee, the Colombian beans I had been saving, and sat down again with the folder. Each page was not just about money. Each page was a memory. The down payment that drained Margaret's life insurance policy. The storm windows that cost me 3 months of not eating out. The automatic transfers that meant I wore boots with cracked soles for 3 winters. For 5 years, I had been their silent partner. Now, I was about to become their silent adversary. The first step was simple: stop the bleeding. I called my credit union that afternoon. I need to cancel an automatic transfer, I told the woman on the line. She typed, professional and polite. Will this be effective immediately? She asked. Yes, I replied, my voice steady, surprising even myself. Effective immediately. The keyboard clicked on, and with each sound, I felt a chain loosening. But canceling the payments was not enough. Not after the words they threw at me. Tessa telling me I was not welcome. Ethan talking about class. His parents looking at me like I was the janitor in their ballroom. No, they wanted atmosphere. I would give them something they could not decorate over. The documented, undeniable truth. So I began assembling the evidence. Receipts, statements, even handwritten notes from Tessa herself. Thanks, Dad. Scribbled on the corners of envelopes when she had needed me to bail them out. I highlighted numbers until the pages glowed yellow, a trail of sacrifice too clear to ignore. Then I moved to their favorite stage, social media. Tessa's Instagram was an album of indulgences. A picture of her new chandelier. Caption: Ethan surprised me. I remembered the $1,200 charge on my card that month. A vacation selfie on the Oregon coast, champagne glasses held high. That was the same month I lived on canned soup because their mortgage payment had left me with nothing. Ethan's LinkedIn made me laugh, though it was not funny. Promotions. Our home has been such a blessing. No mention of who actually provided the blessing. I printed everything. I slid each piece into a clear plastic sleeve. This was not spite, it was justice. Quiet, methodical justice. They did not know it, but while they were stringing lights on a house I built for them, I was building something else. A case. Not for a courtroom, though it would hold up there too, but for their audience, their friends, their circle, the very people they were trying so hard to impress. On December 20th, I drove to an office supply store. I bought 12 folders. I sat at my table for hours, sliding evidence into each one, statements, receipts, screenshots. At the front of each packet, I placed a printout of their Christmas invitation. Excited to host dinner in our beautiful home. I circled the word "our" in red ink. 12 folders. 12 stories of the truth. I rehearsed in my mind how it might unfold. I would walk into their dining room. The chatter would stop. Glasses would freeze midair. The eyes of their friends would follow me. And I would not need anger. Anger can be dismissed. I would have facts. And facts, when spoken calmly, are sharper than rage. But I also knew Ethan's father, Preston Dalton, would not stay quiet. Men like him never do. He had connections in Columbus, old banking ties, country club memberships, people who believe reputation is currency. If I embarrassed him, he would retaliate. So I prepared for that too. I drafted a letter to old clients, the people whose kitchens I built, whose porches I repaired. I reminded them of my work, my honesty, my name. I told them, rumors may come, but my record stands. I sealed the letters, ready to be mailed if necessary. I also called in a quiet favor. Years ago, I had built bookshelves for a local journalist, Elaine. I found her number. If you hear my name being dragged through the mud, I said, call me first. I will have documents for you. She agreed. Piece by piece, I built not just a shield, but a sword. By December 23rd, everything was ready. The folders stacked inside my old leather briefcase. My navy blue suit, pressed, the same one I wore to Margaret's funeral. Only this time, it was not for mourning. It was for standing my ground. The sentence kept replaying in my mind. My daughter told me I was not welcome for Christmas. Over and over, like a scar you cannot help but press. But I knew that once Christmas was over, she would never dare say those words again. On the morning of Christmas Eve, I stood by the window sipping coffee, watching the snow fall gently on the street. Across town, Tessa was probably basting the turkey. Ethan's parents were likely rehearsing their smiles, ready to preside over the evening. And I was ready, too. Ready to walk into their perfect dining room with the one thing they could not cover up with wrapping paper, the truth. Everything was set. I just needed the right moment. Christmas Eve arrived cold and still, the kind of night where sound travels farther than it should. I adjusted my navy blazer, picked up the heavy leather briefcase, and drove toward Tessa's neighborhood. Her street glittered with white lights strung along roof lines, illuminated wreaths on polished doors. My tires crunched over the clean, salted pavement, the kind of perfect suburb made for social media. I parked across from their house. The driveway was full of cars, and so was the street. Through the windows, I could see Tessa moving between the kitchen and the table, Ethan pouring wine, laughter floating out into the night. I waited until the dashboard clock read 6:45. Then I got out. I walked slowly up their stone path and turned the handle of the front door. Unlocked, of course. Why would they lock it? They believed nothing ugly could ever reach them. The warmth of central heating washed over me as I stepped inside. The smell of roast turkey, pine candles, and expensive perfume filled my nose. And then the sound. Conversation, clinking silverware, polished voices. I walked toward the dining room. 12 faces turned. Forks hovered midair. Wine glasses froze in their ascent. Tessa's eyes widened first. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Ethan stiffened in his chair, his hand tightening on the stem of his glass. His parents, Preston and Vivian, looked at me as if I were a stray dog that had wandered in. I did not rush. I placed my briefcase gently on their marble-topped sideboard, opened it, the metallic snaps echoing in the silence. "Good evening," I said calmly. "I will not take much of your time. I just thought your guests should know who paid for this dinner, this house, this lifestyle you are all enjoying." The silence stretched until it was ready to break. A woman at the table, someone I did not know, perhaps one of Vivian's charity friends, leaned forward. "What is he talking about?" Tessa's voice was sharp. "He is having some kind of episode. Ethan, call someone." But I was already moving around the table. With each step, I placed a folder in front of another guest. The gentle tap of the folders on the linen napkins was the only sound. 5 years of mortgage payments, I explained softly. $2,150 every single month. A $40,000 down payment. Renovations, furniture, utilities. I kept their lights on. And in return, I was told I was not welcome. Gasps spread around the table. One man flipped through the pages, his brow furrowed. This is real." I nodded. Every dime came from me. While I ate canned soup, they toasted with champagne. While my boots split at the seams, they bought chandeliers. It is all documented right there. Tessa's face turned crimson. "You offered to help us. You offered." I let the word hang in the air. I did not offer. I sacrificed. There is a difference. Ethan's father finally spoke, his voice booming as if he were still sitting behind a banker's desk. "This is disgraceful. Barging into a family dinner to air your bitterness." I cut him off, quiet but firm. Disgraceful is telling a man he is not good enough to sit at the table he built. Disgraceful is using his money and then erasing his presence. I placed the last packet in front of Vivian. Her hands trembled slightly as she turned the first page. Then I pulled out the newspaper article and placed it in the center of the table. 3 days ago, I said, you might have seen my face in print. An article about me supposedly abandoning an elderly couple at the airport. The reasons given? Dangerous weather, erratic behavior. I tapped the page. There was no storm that day, just a story planted to ruin me. Planted by this man, I said, pointing at Preston, because I finally stopped being their driver. A murmur went through the table. Someone whispered, "Oh my God, that is not." "You do not understand," Vivian stammered. "I understand perfectly," I said, sliding my phone onto the table. On the screen were screenshots of Tessa's posts. "You did not want me at Christmas because my food was embarrassing, because my stories were not refined enough, because my name did not look right next to yours." The woman in pearls, clearly one of Vivian's closest friends, looked horrified. "Tessa, is this true?" Tessa's voice broke. "This is private. He is twisting things." "No," I said, my voice filling the room. "This stopped being private when you dragged my name through the mud. Tonight, I am setting the record straight." I snapped my briefcase shut. The sound made them all flinch. "As of tonight," I said, standing tall, "I will not be paying another dime. Not for the roof over your heads, not for the dinners you serve, and not for the lies you tell." The table erupted in overlapping voices. Ethan trying to calm Tessa, Vivian hissing at Preston, the guests flipping through papers, some shaking their heads in disgust, others looking on in revulsion. And I turned and walked toward the door, my steps slow and steady. At the threshold, I stopped and looked back one last time. The room I had financed was now filled with whispers, shame, and the distinct sound of their image cracking apart. No one stopped me. I stepped out into the night. The snow was falling softly now, blanketing the street, catching the glow from the Christmas lights. My breath plumed in the air, and in that silence, I finally felt free. As I drove home that night, the weight on my chest was gone. For years, I had carried their debts, their image, their judgment. But now, I carried nothing. The silence in my house no longer felt hollow. It felt clean. It felt mine. I poured myself a glass of Margaret's favorite whiskey and raised it to her photograph. For the first time in 5 years, I did not feel ashamed. I did not feel invisible. I was simply a man who had drawn a line. 3 months later, a letter arrived at Tessa's house. A notice of default. The missed payments were piling up. 14 days to fix it or face foreclosure. She tried to call, of course. She tried to cry, to plead, to beg. But I had already given more than most fathers would give in 2 lifetimes. The truth is, I forgave her. I forgave all of them. But forgiving does not mean returning to the chains that bind you. Forgiveness is walking forward without hate and without carrying their weight on your back. I still think about Tessa sometimes, my little girl with the scraped knees and wide eyes, the daughter who once called me her hero. Somewhere along the way, she traded that bond for appearances, for an approval that was not worth the paper it was printed on. And I suppose that is the hardest truth of all. But I learned something. Respect is not bought with money. Love is not proven with checks. And family is not the people who smile when you are paying their bills. It is the people who smile simply because you walked in the door. So yes, my daughter told me I was not welcome for Christmas. But what she did not understand was this. Her rejection gave me back my dignity. Her cruelty handed me my freedom. And in that freedom, I found peace. If you have ever been pushed aside, looked down upon, or told you were not enough, remember this. Your worth does not come from the seats they save you at their table. It comes from the strength it takes to build your own. That was the year I stopped being a shadow in someone else's story and finally became the author of my own. Comment. What strikes me most about Walter's journey is the quiet strength it takes to choose yourself. It reminds me that our dignity should never be the price of admission for someone else's comfort. Setting boundaries is not an act of cruelty. It is often the highest form of self-care. True kindness must include being kind to ourselves, too. We cannot control how others treat us, but we are responsible for what we are willing to accept. Sometimes healing does not look like a mended bridge, but like walking away to build your own solid ground. His goal was not revenge, but reclaiming his peace, which is a powerful lesson in itself. I hope this story encourages you to look at the relationships in your own life with clarity. Remember that your worth is inherent and not dependent on anyone else's validation. Take care of yourself, and remember to honor your own story. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.